There comes a point in the journey of awakening when love, the very thing that once felt like home, begins to feel like a foreign language. You meet people, you connect, but something in you knows it isn't the same anymore. The conversations that used to excite you now drain you. The intensity that once meant passion now feels like noise. You see through the illusions so quickly that it becomes almost impossible to pretend. You are no longer seeking company. You are seeking connection. But in a world that confuses attachment with love, that kind of connection is rare. Carl Jung said, "The meeting of two personalities is like the contact of two chemical substances. If there is any reaction, both are transformed." For the spiritually awake, love is not about comfort, it's about transformation. And that's why it's so hard, because most people don't want to transform. They want to be adored, validated, distracted. But real love, awakened love, doesn't give you comfort. It gives you clarity. It doesn't complete you. It exposes you. It doesn't protect your ego. It dissolves it. When your consciousness expands, your vision of love changes entirely. You stop searching for someone to fill the silence because you've made peace with it. You stop craving constant validation because you've met the part of yourself that no longer needs it. You stop chasing emotional highs because you've realized that love is not supposed to be a roller coaster. It's supposed to be a mirror. And once you've seen yourself clearly in that mirror, you can't go back to blindness. This is the paradox of awakening. The more conscious you become, the fewer people you can truly connect with. You can still love everyone, but not everyone can meet you there. You begin to see the masks people wear, the ways they hide from themselves through relationships. You notice how they confuse dependency with devotion, chemistry with destiny, and control with care. You feel their energy before they speak. You sense when love is manipulation dressed as affection. You can't unsee it. It's not arrogance, it's awareness. Jung believed that most relationships are unconscious agreements between two egos seeking completion in each other. But the spiritually awake no longer seek completion outside themselves. They've met their own shadow, befriended their loneliness, and found divinity in solitude. They know that love cannot save you. It can only mirror the part of you willing to be saved. This is what makes love so rare after awakening. You've stepped out of the dream that most people still call reality. You no longer project your needs onto another person. You see them as they are. And when you see clearly, illusions can't hold you anymore. You crave depth, but depth scares the world. You crave intimacy, but not the kind built on comfort, the kind built on truth. You want someone who doesn't flinch when you talk about pain. Someone who doesn't run when you become silent. Someone whose presence feels like home, not escape. But that kind of love requires two awakened hearts. And that's what makes it feel almost impossible, because while the awakened see connection as communion, the asleep still see it as transaction. The world teaches love as possession, but awakening teaches love as surrender. And most people aren't ready to surrender. They don't want to see themselves through your mirror. They want to be admired, not revealed. Awakening turns love into sacred ground. It becomes less about finding the one, and more about becoming the one who can hold love without fear. Jung said that the privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. The spiritually awake take that seriously. They know that unless you've met your own soul, you will mistake attraction for love and attachment for devotion. You will confuse being needed with being seen. You will settle for someone who fits your patterns instead of someone who challenges them. That's why the spiritually awake often choose solitude. Not because they hate love, but because they've learned to love differently. They've learned to wait. They've learned that absence can be sacred. They've learned that the love that awakens the soul does not arrive through seeking, but through alignment. You don't find it, you attract it when you've become what you seek. And yet even in their solitude, they feel love everywhere. They feel it in silence, in music, in strangers, in prayer. They no longer need to possess love to feel it. Love has stopped being an object and become a state of being. Jung would call this the integration of the Anima and Animus, the sacred union of the masculine and feminine within the self. Once that balance is found inside, external relationships no longer serve as completion, but as reflection. You stop asking someone to make you whole because you've realized you already are. Still, the heart longs. Even the awakened crave touch, presence, and belonging. But now they crave it differently. They don't want someone to fix them. They want someone to meet them, to walk beside them without fear, without ownership, without pretending. To love not from need, but from recognition. To look into each other's eyes and see not fantasy, but God. But this kind of meeting requires two souls who have done the same inner work. Two people who have faced their shadows and learned to love through awareness, not projection. Jung believed that where love reigns, there is no will to power, and where power predominates, love is lacking. Most relationships are still about power, the subtle dance of control, dominance, and validation. The awakened can no longer participate in that dance. Their spirit rebels against it, so they walk alone for a while, not as punishment, but as preparation. The solitude of the awakened is not loneliness, it's initiation. They are learning how to hold love without fear, how to give without losing themselves, how to receive without closing their heart. They are learning the balance between devotion and detachment, the kind of love that doesn't need to own anything to honor it. When the spiritually awake love, it's not casual, it's cosmic. They don't fall in love, they rise in love. Their relationships are no longer about filling voids, but about expanding light. They love with their whole being, consciously, fearlessly, without pretense. But that kind of love is too much for those who still live on the surface. It's too intense for those who haven't yet met their own depth. And so, the awakened often find themselves misunderstood. Too much, too deep, too quiet, too real. They can't dim their light to fit into small love anymore. They can't shrink to be digestible. Once you've known divine love, once you've felt the presence of God within your own heart, everything else feels incomplete. And that's not arrogance. That's remembrance. You've remembered what love truly is, the recognition of the divine in another. Anything less feels false. So yes, the spiritually awake often can't find love, not because it doesn't exist, but because they can't pretend anymore. They can't participate in illusion. They can't perform affection for approval. They can't build relationships on conditions. They would rather wait in sacred solitude than settle for half-truths. Because they know that the only love worth having is the one that doesn't ask them to sleep again. Comment this phrase below. I seek truth, not illusion. And if this message resonates with your soul, subscribe, because the next part will reveal what happens when two awakened souls finally meet, and how Jung described their love as the divine union of consciousness itself. When two spiritually awake souls meet, the world seems to hold its breath. There is no rush, no performance, no need to impress, only recognition. It feels less like a beginning and more like a remembering, as if you had been waiting for this meeting across lifetimes, as if God himself orchestrated the timing. This is not the love of romance novels or fairy tales. It's not loud or dramatic. It's calm, sacred, ancient. Like two stars colliding silently in the darkness, creating light that will outlive them both. Carl Jung called this sacred union the coniunctio, the merging of opposites, the masculine and feminine, the conscious and unconscious, the human and divine. In the alchemical language Jung loved so deeply, it's the moment when gold is created from lead, when the friction between two souls becomes transformation. The awakened don't come together to fill a void. They come together to amplify light. And that's why their love feels so different, because it isn't about possession, it's about reflection. When two awakened souls look at each other, they don't just see beauty, they see truth. They see every shadow, every scar, every unhealed fragment, and they love through it, not around it. Their connection doesn't rely on illusion, because illusion has already burned away. They don't need each other to survive. They choose each other to evolve. In their union, both are changed, not because they complete one another, but because they awaken deeper aspects of the divine within themselves. This is what makes awakened love so rare and so powerful. It demands everything. It doesn't allow masks, ego games, or half-truths. You can't hide behind your trauma or your pride. When you stand before another awakened soul, they see you, not the curated version, not the story, not the survival persona, but the raw, trembling essence of who you really are. They see the divine and the damage at once, and they love both. And that kind of love strips you bare until nothing false can remain. Jung believed that all relationships serve the process of individuation, the journey toward wholeness. Most people enter relationships to escape themselves. The awakened enter relationships to meet themselves. Love becomes a spiritual laboratory where projection turns into revelation. You begin to see how much of what you thought was them is actually you, your shadow, your wounds, your patterns reflected back through their behavior. It's humbling. It's uncomfortable, but it's sacred. In the presence of awakened love, your ego trembles because it senses its own death. Love in its truest form is not gentle, it's cleansing. It burns away illusion until only essence remains. You begin to realize that every argument, every trigger, every silence is an invitation, not to run, but to integrate. Every misunderstanding becomes an opportunity to expand your capacity for compassion. The awakened don't run from pain. They sit with it together. They let truth break them open and then rebuild them in the image of something higher. There's a stillness between awakened lovers that feels like prayer. You don't need to speak to feel understood. Presence itself becomes communication. Time slows. Energy flows like water. You become aware of how the universe rearranges itself around your shared vibration. Synchronicities increase, intuition sharpens, dreams intertwine. It's as if your souls are co-authoring reality. Jung would call this the alignment of two psyches moving toward a shared self, not two halves forming one, but two wholes remembering oneness. But this kind of love also tests you in ways ordinary love never could. When you love someone consciously, you can't hide behind your spiritual identity. The awakened partner will call out your shadow gently but without compromise. They will mirror back the parts of you that still seek control, validation, or safety in illusion. And in those moments, love becomes crucifixion and resurrection all at once. You die to who you were so that something purer can emerge. Jung said, the most terrifying thing is to accept oneself completely. Awakened love gives you no choice but to do exactly that. Sometimes this kind of love doesn't last in the physical world. Not because it fails, but because its purpose has been fulfilled. Awakened souls often meet, not to build a life together, but to build light together. They awaken dormant energy within each other, activate purpose, dissolve karmic residues, and then sometimes they part. It hurts, yes, but even the pain feels sacred because you sense the divine timing in it. You understand that nothing real can be lost. Love does not end when form changes. It transcends form entirely. The awakened understand that love is not possession. It is permission. Permission for another soul to be exactly what God intended. You stop trying to hold people where you found them because you know that evolution demands movement. Sometimes, the most loving thing you can do is let go. Jung said that everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves. In awakened love, even separation becomes enlightenment, a mirror showing what still needs to heal within. When two awakened beings stay together, their relationship becomes an ecosystem of growth. They don't compete, they complement. They don't demand, they inspire. Their love is not a refuge from life, but a continuation of awakening. Together, they face life's storms with calm, not because they're invincible, but because they know the storm is also God. Their arguments don't destroy trust, they deepen intimacy. Because truth, no matter how painful, is always safer than illusion. In the union of two conscious souls, love becomes transparent. There's no need for constant reassurance, because insecurity has been replaced by presence. They don't need to fix each other's wounds. They simply hold space for them. Healing happens naturally in the frequency of truth. The energy between them is both human and divine, soft yet powerful, ordinary yet infinite. It's not about avoiding pain. It's about remembering love even inside it. Awakened love also redefines attraction. You stop being drawn to bodies or appearances. You are drawn to resonance. You sense the energy of a person before you notice their face. You are magnetized not by looks, but by light. The chemistry is spiritual before it's physical. The connection feels like destiny, but not in the romanticized sense. It feels inevitable, like recognition between two sparks of the same flame. The love between two awakened souls doesn't drain, it restores. You don't lose yourself in them. You find yourself more fully. There's no fear of abandonment because you've both outgrown the illusion of ownership. You don't say, "You complete me," because you already are complete. You say, "You reflect me," and that reflection becomes your greatest teacher. Jung said that the meeting of two personalities is like the contact of two chemical substances. The awakened know this well. When love is real, both are transformed. To love at this level is to enter the divine classroom. Every interaction becomes instruction. Every silence becomes sermon. You begin to see that God is the third presence in the relationship, not a distant deity, but the very consciousness that holds you both. Love becomes the altar where human and divine meet. And when two awakened souls make love, it's not just physical union, it's the merging of energies, the blending of heaven and earth. It's prayer in motion, but the truth is, even this kind of love is not free of challenges. In fact, it demands more awareness, more humility, more surrender. The more light there is between two souls, the more shadow it reveals. You will face your deepest fears in the mirror of awakened love, the fear of loss, the fear of vulnerability, the fear of truly being seen. But instead of destroying the relationship, these fears become the path. The awakened use love as a tool for integration. They don't escape through it. They evolve through it, and perhaps that is why the spiritually awake often can't find love easily. Because they are not looking for ordinary relationships anymore. They are waiting for this, for the sacred mirror, for the divine fire, for the kind of love that purifies everything it touches. A love that is not a story but a sacrament. A love that doesn't fade with time because it exists beyond it. Comment this phrase below. I seek divine union, not attachment. And if this truth speaks to your soul, subscribe, because the next part will reveal what happens when awakened love meets divine purpose, and how Jung saw the merging of souls as humanity's highest form of consciousness. When two spiritually awake souls unite, something larger than themselves begins to move. Their connection ceases to be about emotion or desire. It becomes a vessel through which divine purpose flows. The relationship transforms from romance into revelation, from partnership into prophecy. It is no longer two people in love, but love itself choosing two people to express through. Carl Jung believed that in all chaos there is a cosmos, in all disorder a secret order. When two awakened beings find each other, that secret order begins to unfold. They start to see that their meeting was not coincidence, it was alignment. Every wound that once isolated them now serves as sacred material for the creation of something greater. Their love becomes an alchemical container, fire that refines instead of burns. The spiritually awake do not see love as a personal victory, but as a calling. They understand that the purpose of their union is not happiness, but expansion. When two conscious souls merge, their combined energy amplifies beyond comprehension. It begins to affect everything around them, the atmosphere, the people they touch, even the unseen currents of fate. Their presence becomes catalytic. They awaken others simply by being. This is what Jung hinted at when he spoke of the self, the divine center within the psyche that seeks realization through human experience. When two people live from this self rather than the ego, Their love becomes the living expression of God in the world. They are no longer two separate beings falling in love. They are two aspects of the same consciousness remembering itself. It is here that love becomes purpose. You no longer ask, "What can I get from this?" but "What can we give through this?" You begin to sense that your connection carries a mission to heal, to inspire, to create. The energy between you wants to move, to build, to serve. It's as if the universe uses your bond as a frequency of light in a darkened world. The love between two awakened souls is not private. It radiates. And yet, this kind of love demands deep humility. You cannot possess what belongs to the divine. You must learn to hold love with open hands, to serve its will rather than your desire. This is the sacred paradox. The more you surrender, the stronger the connection becomes. The more you try to control it, the faster it slips away. The awakened understand that the relationship is not theirs, it's God's. They are merely its stewards. In this union, love becomes prayer with skin. Every act of care, every word of honesty, every moment of presence becomes worship. The couple doesn't need rituals to invoke the divine. Their awareness itself is the ritual. Their intimacy becomes a sanctuary where spirit and matter merge. Jung would call this the realization of the hieros gamos, the sacred marriage of heaven and earth within human form. When awakened lovers come together, even their silence heals. They sit together and the air changes. They look into each other's eyes and feel the entire history of creation pulsing between them. Words become unnecessary because the soul has found its mirror. This is not passion as the world defines it. This is recognition. The spark between them is not lust but remembrance. The remembrance that love is not something to chase, it is what we already are. And through this awareness, their union begins to serve something higher. They start to create, not out of ambition, but out of alignment. Their work, their art, their words, their presence, all become channels through which consciousness expresses itself. The love that once felt personal becomes universal. They no longer love each other as me and you, but as we. And that simple shift changes everything. But this love also tests them more than any other, because divine love is not sentimental, it is surgical. It cuts away every remnant of ego that still clings to identity. You cannot hold divine love with a small heart. You must expand again and again until the boundaries of your being disappear. Jung said, "One does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious." In awakened love, the darkness of both partners is illuminated, not to shame, but to heal. When the ego dissolves, love no longer hurts the way it used to. Pain still comes, but it is clean, purposeful, transforming. You stop seeing disagreements as battles and start seeing them as mirrors. You realize that every tension is simply the universe asking for integration. Together, you learn to hold paradox without breaking. You become both student and teacher, mirror and reflection, wound and healing. Awakened love redefines fidelity. It is not measured by possession, but by presence. You no longer need promises to stay faithful. Awareness itself is your vow. You understand that betrayal happens long before cheating. It begins when you stop seeing the other as divine. So you keep seeing every day with reverence. You see their flaws as expressions of humanity and their essence as an expression of God. You love them not because they are perfect, but because you recognize perfection through them. There is a kind of peace that comes from this. You stop fighting for love and start cooperating with it. You stop analyzing its every motion and start trusting its flow. You realize that love knows where it's going. It doesn't need your control. You learn to listen, to surrender, to serve. And in doing so, you discover that true love doesn't take from you. It expands you until there's nothing left but light. As this expansion deepens, the couple begins to embody something archetypal. They become symbols, like Adam and Eve, Shiva and Shakti, Christ and the Church, the sun and the moon. They represent the eternal dance of duality resolving into unity. Their story is no longer personal, it's mythic. Through them, the divine remembers itself. Their love becomes living scripture, a reminder to humanity that love was never about finding another person, but about finding God through another soul. But make no mistake, this is not an easy path. Divine love will strip away every falsehood. It will break your pride, confront your wounds, expose your fears. It will ask you to give up control and love without safety nets. To love like this means to trust the unknown completely. The spiritually awake accept this challenge, not because it's comfortable, but because it's true. They would rather live one day in divine truth than a lifetime in illusion. Eventually, this kind of love transcends even partnership. You begin to see that the same divine presence you felt in your lover exists in everyone, in strangers, in nature, in silence. Your love stops being exclusive and becomes expansive. You carry it into the world like a fragrance. You walk differently. You speak differently. You exist differently. Because now every encounter feels sacred. You start to see God in everything, not metaphorically, but literally. The divine looks back at you from every pair of eyes. At this stage, the awakened lovers no longer fear distance or death. They know that nothing can separate what was never divided. Whether together or apart, their connection remains unbroken because it was never built on form, but on essence. Their love is not limited to time, it belongs to eternity. Jung said, "The meeting of two personalities is like the contact of two chemical substances. In awakened love, that contact ignites something that can't be undone." This is why the spiritually awake can't easily find love, because they are not looking for someone to complete them, but someone who will join them in completing the divine work. They are waiting for the one whose presence awakens prayer, whose eyes speak in silence, whose heart beats in rhythm with truth. A partner, yes, but more than that, a mirror of God. Comment this phrase below: "My love is a divine mission." And if this message awakened something within you, subscribe, because the next part will reveal what happens when this divine love becomes embodied service, and how Jung believed that through sacred union, humanity itself evolves toward God. There comes a moment when awakened love stops being about two people and starts being about the world. The intimacy between two conscious souls expands until it touches everything around them. Their love ceases to be a private flame. It becomes a fire that warms humanity. What began as connection now becomes contribution. What started as healing each other becomes healing creation itself. Carl Jung believed that when a human being unites the conscious and the unconscious within, they become a channel for the divine order to flow through. Two awakened souls together magnify this channel. Their love turns into living prayer, not spoken but embodied. Every gesture, every act, every word becomes an offering. They no longer ask, "How can this relationship serve us?" but "How can it serve the whole?" This is the transformation of love into service. The awakened realize that love was never meant to end in the bedroom or in poetry. It was meant to spill into the world. The tenderness they give each other becomes the compassion they extend to everyone. Their patience with one another becomes their patience with humanity. The forgiveness they practice together becomes their ministry of mercy. They become living proof that the divine still moves through human hearts. When love reaches this level, it stops being emotion and becomes presence. It's no longer about who you love, but how you love, how you move, speak, breathe, and create. Everything becomes infused with awareness. Jung called this the embodiment of the self, when the inner God is no longer an idea, but a living force. You don't talk about awakening anymore. You demonstrate it through the way you exist. The spiritually awake don't need to preach. Their presence preaches for them. They can walk into a room and change the vibration without saying a word. They can listen and heal without advice. They can touch someone's pain without absorbing it. Their energy becomes medicine because it's clean, purified by truth. And that's what makes their love revolutionary. It's not a concept. It's a vibration that transmits awakening through simple being. Jung said that the greatest and most important problems of life are all fundamentally insoluble. They can never be solved, but only outgrown. That's what happens in divine love. You outgrow the small self that needs control, validation, or reciprocation. You no longer love to receive. You love because love is what you are. And once you become love itself, you stop searching for it. You start radiating it. This kind of embodied love redefines purpose. The spiritually awake don't chase meaning anymore. They live it. Their relationships, their work, their art, their silence, all become channels for divine consciousness. They don't ask, "What is my mission?" Because they've realized that love itself is the mission. Love expressed through awareness, through honesty, through creation. When you move from that energy, everything you do becomes sacred. The awakened lovers begin to serve not from duty, but from overflow. Their connection fills them until it spills naturally into the world. They may start projects, write, teach, heal, create, not to be seen, but because their love needs expression. Jung understood this instinct when he said that the meeting of two personalities is like the contact of two chemical substances. If there is any reaction, both are transformed, but that transformation doesn't stop with them. It ripples outward, touching others, awakening others. You begin to realize that your love story is not just yours. It's a symbol, a reminder that humanity's evolution depends on its capacity to love consciously. When two awakened souls model that love, they become a map for others still finding their way. Their relationship demonstrates that vulnerability is not weakness, that surrender is not loss, that truth is not cruelty, but compassion. Through their living example, they show that heaven is not elsewhere. It's created here, in the space between two hearts aligned with God. The more they love this way, the less they need recognition. They no longer crave being understood because they understand everything. They live in surrender, not the surrender of defeat, but the surrender of trust. They know that love cannot fail because it never ends. Even if their paths separate, the love remains because the purpose remains. Jung believed that what the soul truly loves, it never loses. It carries within eternally. At this stage, the awakened experience love as frequency. It flows through every cell of their being, vibrating beyond emotion into essence. They become aware that everything alive is part of one continuous pulse, what mystics call the heartbeat of God. To love is to align yourself with that rhythm. When you live from that alignment, you are never alone. Every tree, every breeze, every moment whispers the same word back to you, beloved. And this is the final revelation, that love was never meant to be found because it was never lost. What the spiritually awake finally see is that love was not waiting in another person. It was waiting in perception. Once your perception becomes clear, you realize that the divine has been loving you through everything, through joy and pain, through solitude and union, through every face you've ever met. Love was the hidden pattern behind every experience. The spiritually awake stop searching for partners and start recognizing reflections. They no longer ask, "Will I ever find love?" Because they see it everywhere. Every act of kindness, every honest word, every spark of creativity is love in motion. Every breath is proof that God has not stopped giving. In that realization, you are finally at peace, not because everything is perfect, but because everything is sacred. To live like this is to walk the world as a living prayer. You wake up and bless the day without words. You look at strangers and see your own soul looking back. You no longer protect yourself from love because you have nothing left to lose. You have become what you sought. Jung once said that the privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. The spiritually awake know now that who they truly are is love itself. So yes, it is hard for the awakened to find love, because the love they seek cannot be found in the usual places. It doesn't exist in distraction, in pretense, or in fear. It exists only in truth. But once they discover it within themselves, they realize they never lost it. They simply had to remember, and when they do, their very existence becomes an act of devotion. Their footsteps become prayer. Their breath becomes worship. Their life becomes the temple. They walk quietly through the world, not seeking, not proving, only radiating. Because now they understand the deepest secret of all. You do not find divine love. You become it. Comment this phrase below: I am love in motion. And if this message awakened something in your soul, subscribe, because awakening doesn't end when you find love. It begins when you live as love.